Thank you. Who worked, Mr. Wiest, who worked on the proposal process for Sinatra Drive?
Yeah, I was not on the team. I believe Director Morgan was. I know Mr. Marks was, but he's not with us this evening. Director, can you comment?
I mean, we met last week, but it was before the agenda was out, though this probably would have been a good item for us to discuss. Can you shed some light?
Myself, Stephen Marks, and Juan Mealy reviewed 11 proposals. Took a long time to read through 11 proposals.
Yeah, I think it's a little more than that. It's the process in which to create the RFP and who was involved in that and why it may have been limited in scope. May have been limited in scope. So I think we need a little more information.
Council President?
Well, we reviewed 11 proposals.
But to get to the proposals, to be received, I mean, we want to know what was at the front end. Like, what was the process to create the RFP, the criteria?
Stephen Marks.
Okay.
Council President,
Council President?
Yes,
if I may.
Councilman.
I really think, and this is something that needs to be attended to, the strip of Sinatra Drive in the area, but you know, as the chair of both the Community Development Committee and the Parking and Transportation Committee, where we weren't looped in on this, that concerns me. I think this needs to be something that both of those committees really needed to kind of sink their teeth into and
Be a part of.
really be kept abreast of the entire scope, what the scope could be, what the scope was in the proposal, the request for proposals that was sent out. You know, the whole thing. And now we're hearing about this, in my mind, too late in the game. So I would like to bring this to committee and get fully briefed in both committees about what this entails, what it could have entailed, and if we've done this in the right way according to the council's point of view.
Director, when did the process start? Not reviewing the applications, not reviewing, but rather to create the RFP. When did that, do you know when that
I don't
began?
know when Stephen started on it. It was sent out last month. It came back with
Okay.
11 different engineering firms responding to it.
Council President,
Councilman Russo and then Councilman Castellano.
Thank you, Council President. Director, and I know you don't have a lot of the answers about how the RFP was created and that, but specifically with how the firm was chosen, was it merely just the score?
Yes.
Was the highest score?
There's a criteria.
Right.
And different elements of the criteria that are in the RFP are weighed in different values.
Right. And
Some
the
have
reason-
10, some have 5, some have...
The reason I ask that is it's really a policy decision, because we've had firms, and not necessarily engineering firms or planning firms, but we've had lawyers, we've had a whole host of different firms that have been evaluated with these different criteria, and we didn't always necessarily choose the one with the highest score. So from your perspective, and anyone else who cares to chime in, is the policy that the highest score is the firm that we're choosing, or are there other things that are really helping us along the way? Because I'm kind of confused, because in past we haven't always chosen that.
Correct. You are correct in saying that the highest score does not always mean that's the firm that's going to be awarded the bid.
Okay.
So, in fact, the last one that we put out for Washington Street, it was number 3 on the list that was awarded that. Not number 1, not number 2, it was number 3.
Right. So
Okay.
could you elaborate a little bit as to what those other criteria are in choosing the firm, and do we tweak the equation, for lack of a better term, as to coming up with the score? Do we tweak that to incorporate those other criteria so that we do just base it on a score, right? We want an objective measure here. We don't want subjective measures.
Correct.
Right? So when the public sees that, oh, they chose the highest score, great. 2 weeks later, another firm for a different RFP comes in and they're the third person on the list. There's no explanation there. People don't understand that. So if there are other criteria, why isn't that kind of rolled into the score so that we do have an objective measure always without deviation?
So without having the RFP and the scoring sheet in front of you, in front of me to explain it to you, it would be very difficult at this time to do that. I can tell you that in the last one we put out for Washington Street, the 1, 2, and 3 scores were very close together. Okay? In this situation, the scoring was such that you had more than a 10-point, 13-point difference between number 1 and number 2. And because it's a public forum, anyone can get up to the microphone and speak about what their personal feelings are. But unless everyone wants to go through 11 proposals every time, I think you have to leave it up to the professionals that you've hired to do the work.
Well, I don't have a problem leaving it up to the professionals. What the problem that I have is that when we talk about the appearance of being open in our government, there's not really an openness about having a score that haphazardly doesn't really mean much to someone because they don't see that the highest score gets the bid, right? They see that, well, sometimes the highest score gets the bid, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's the third person on the list. And if it is just a small differential, I'm still not understanding the tangibles that are creating that score versus the tangibles that are outside that score. What is the major difference? I mean, isn't that why we put together this equation so that we can incorporate all these different tangibles?
Yes.
Right?
Councilor Russo?
Yes.
There's a policy on it. I've distributed it before to council, but it was probably a year ago, so I'll redistribute it to all council.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I understand that the policy was set by the state and they sent it to us and we may have tweaked it a little bit. But again, I think it's important for us to explain, not just to the council, but to the public. Because when we have members of the public coming up and saying, I just don't get it, this person scored higher, why aren't they getting that bid? They should be more qualified if they have a higher score, shouldn't they? Right? And those are the questions that I get as a councilman in the 3rd Ward. People come to me and ask me about things, well, I don't understand why this was chosen versus that. And I don't have an answer for them because, quite frankly, I don't understand it because the administration's policy is a little different, right? So I think we need to kind of explain it a little bit better.
Yeah, and let me just say this. The scoring sometimes, although there may be some point differences, when we look at the items that we're scoring, some of them are just omissions of information, which onto itself doesn't carry a lot of weight. But the criteria of what we're looking for in the proposal has a higher value. And when we look at that, we look at how the firm addressed that issue. Okay, maybe they left out a professional license. Maybe they left out some other thing. But the criteria, the heavyweight, is how they've addressed the issue that we're looking for.
So
I
it's
mean,
weighted.
without having that form in front of you, you're right, it would be hard for you to understand that.
All right.
Council President, I'm just going to jump ahead here. I mean, it seems like there's a threshold issue here about whether or not you'd like to handle this in committee. I mean, if that's the feeling of the group, you might want to just...
Well, we are going to pull it.
Take it there.
But Councilwoman
Yes,
Castellano?
thank you. And that was exactly what I wanted to say. I agree with Councilman Mello. Belongs in, I don't sit on any of those committees, but it belongs in 2 committees. When we did New Jersey Transit, we had, I don't remember how many, but we narrowed it down to 3. And we interviewed those 3. I think Councilman Acapinti was on the committee at the time. And that went very well, face-to-face, in a room, you know, asking questions. And also, I would like to suggest that a representative from the FBW be available to one of those or many of those meetings, because they have these concerns, very legitimate. They did a lot of work, and they should be addressed also.
Council President, I happen to agree with you, Council President, and Councilwoman Castellano in this regard. And I'm very concerned because it goes through a pretty significant part of my ward. And to not have it addressed Union Dry Dock, which we have a humongous issue with the intersection of Sinatra and Sinatra, because when you go to make that right turn, which is supposed to be only a right turn, but people don't do that, and you look to the left, you can't see. And if you address only the street or the sidewalk, that's not going to cure that problem. And I am very concerned we're going to put $100,000 into something and still have a potential hazard to drivers and pedestrians that can't be addressed because we're not looking at it in a much broader perspective, as the Fund for a Better Waterfront stated earlier. So, although I'm not on the committee, I would like to put that in the pile of things to consider, if you would. It is a big issue, and I'd like to see it addressed in the RFP somehow.
Again, Councilwoman, let me just explain that. Although anyone can get up and say what they think is and is not addressed, until you've actually read through a proposal that thick, it's hard to just say it's not addressed. No one from the public has seen that.
Okay, then maybe we should release it.
We can't do that until there's an award.
Councilman Acapete?
If I may, I'd like to make more of a suggestion. I think you got to go back and start from the beginning and make the Fund from a Better Waterfront a strategic partner in this RFP process, who has 25+ years of experience on Hoboken's waterfront. Take that institutional knowledge that they have, create a partnership with them so that they're involved in this discussion. And this discussion has to be also about acquiring property to make the waterfront from Hoboken, in Hoboken, from one end of the city to the other, public open space. And that has to be incorporated into the RFP, so when the process comes back, you have a guideline for the future. You know, we don't have these properties now, but we would one day. And what does it need to look like in the future? And I think versus spending $100,000 to just make the road different, you have to look at how we expand the waterfront in the future. And if the RFP doesn't have that included, you got to go back and start from the beginning. I thought that was what the goal was from the beginning, and it wasn't just a road reconfiguration. I think that has to be the most important part of this RFP process, is the future of the waterfront. That is 100% worthy of spending the money on. That's my suggestion. That's what I'd like to see happen. I won't support something other than that with $100,000 myself. Thank you.
Council President, if I might add one other thing. If somebody could also explain why we're stopping at 11th and not going to 15th, because even though it goes partly through the shipyard project, the roads that go along Sinatra all the way to 15th, there's some particular areas that need to be rethought. I mean, that street is extremely wide. There's potential to actually add either parking or some other things there, and would slow the traffic down because people speed through that area. So I would ask the committee to look at that as well, if they would.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Council President.
Well, Councilwoman Giattino and then Councilman Mel.
Just for clarity, I don't think anyone here is saying that the three of you did not do your job. The point is that the council should have been more involved in the process.
Councilman Mello?
Yeah, that's essentially my point as well. I mean, when it comes to these land use issues, I know this is not in an area in need of redevelopment, which much of our city is, but we're looking at a council here that appoints the majority of the members of the planning board, the vast majority of the members of the zoning board. We are the redevelopment agency for so much of this city, which has been designated in one fashion or another. So just as a rule of thumb, anytime you have these sort of RFPs going out that are going to involve these critical land use issues, I think it's very important to loop in the council into the process from the very beginning, because we do have to answer to our constituents directly. And although I'm not in any way questioning the way the job was done, I don't think it's going to go over well with the public when an RFP comes back and a few members of the administration, some of whom might not even live in the city, are making these decisions about these land use issues that are going to affect all of our residents every day for as long as they live in the city of Hoboken. So let's just, as a policy going forward, anything that has that land use sort of theme should go through our committees.
Okay, very good. All right, this has been pulled from the agenda, so we're going to move on. Thank you, Director. We're going to move on to resolution number 9.